like to ask Richard to have a discussion on the pine nuts.
Okay, I'll try and talk quickly. So the pine nut industry is an emerging industry, or it doesn't really exist in Australia except for the plantations I have. So what are pine nuts, and why should we think they're suited for Australia as a viable industry? So I think this is where Al learnt something yesterday, and I find that just about everybody I talk to has no idea what they are. So all pine trees have cones, and the cones protect the seeds. And these are the seeds in a mature cone that's opened up when it's dried. There they are, processed a bit, and out of these seeds are the kernels, which are the pine nuts that we pay $100 a kilogram for in our supermarkets. It's a very established industry worldwide, so we don't have to establish the industry in that sense. We just have to establish our special Australian one. There's a huge variation in production of these year to year for climatic reasons sometimes, but the total market is $1.6 billion. We import all of ours. 100% of ours come from Asia and China. They're the pine species called Pinus coriensis. So there's a handful of pine species that produce nuts that are considered edible, and Pinus coriensis is one. But the ones we have here are the Pinus pinea, and that's the European stone pine or European umbrella pine, and they're considered superior. They're larger, they're more flavoursome, and they have higher nutritional value than the ones we are all used to here in Australia. So you really need to go to Europe to taste these generally. And I suppose while we're going to the next slide, I'll just say that in terms of the huge world market, we can even produce them in the seed form where they've still got the hull on them and send them to Spain and get €80 a kilogram. The price has gone through the roof. It used to be about €40 a kilogram, and it's now €100. So why Australia? Yes, because they're similar to hobos. They're tolerant of poor conditions. They don't require any irrigation, and they're actually used in Europe, particularly in Spain, Portugal, and Turkey. They're used to stabilise land. They're used to reforest land. They're used to stabilise sand dunes in Portugal and sandy areas in Turkey. So they have another use there. They're one of the few things that grow and can be used for that purpose. They also, of course, have a huge potential for carbon sequestration, because the trees, in fact, live for 150 years or so and are productive for at least 70 years. So I suppose what's the dilemma here? Why hasn't this actually started anyway? Because you will find scattered examples of these very old trees in old Australian gardens. And I think really where the problem lies is if you look at an almond, it's going to be 3 or 4 years after planting until you've got almonds. With these trees, it's considerably longer. It can be anywhere as little as 6 to 7 years, and if we have grafted species, it will be lower. But usually a reliable harvest is really between 10 and 20 years, which is a long time to tie up land. And I think that's probably the main reason they haven't taken on as an industry here. The reason they succeed in Spain and Turkey and those places is the land is usually government land and it's leased back. In New Zealand, there's a huge company, Pinoli, which has a very good established industry. They've had trees in the ground for as long as my plantations have, but they've expanded hugely. It's very productive and successful, but it's bankrolled by a private investor. So in the plan, we considered ways to get around this long lead time, and these are things that I've been trialling and testing on my own orchards, and it's the planting of inter-row crops, as in the upper left image. Inter-row crops partly as a part of regenerative agriculture and soil improvement, but also you can sow in cash crops over those. These are some of the younger trees, 15 years old. They've had the bottom branches pruned off them. I've also been trialling where I've got my new seedlings in with botanicals, so such as lavender, and in this lower slide, strawberry gum or Eucalyptus elida. So those things will produce within 18 months, and so can provide an early yield in the land, and should be able to produce for at least 10 years until the pine trees themselves start to produce. I think we looked at other models where on a much larger scale with conventional cropping, we could have similar circumstances to the upper left picture, but with much broader areas between the trees as we'd have in conventional cropping. They can add then diversity to and stability to the income of those sorts of places. And we can also see them used as wind breaks and shelter breaks on conventional grazing property. So there's many ways we could look at this industry evolving. And then I think we really do have to do some significant work on the carbon sequestration and carbon credits, because these trees are really set for that sort of thing, and that may add a lot of extra value to them. So we really expect a return of between $7,000 and $10,000 a hectare. If we can add into that things for the native botanicals, which may be another 7,000, we look at carbon credits, and I think our market as a clean green product can be made. There's already a world market, and there are valuable byproducts from the waste of the cone mass and prunings, which we can get essential pine oil out of and biochar if we pyrolyse it. So many things we could look at, and in the plan we looked at lots of those things. I had risks and benefits. Risk would be fire. We can reduce that, and it's not as great as we think. Pests, they have lots of problems in Europe. That's why their price has gone through the roof. We don't have that. Cockatoos are a problem, and of course drought is going to affect us anywhere. Thanks, Al.
Fantastic. Richard, thank you so much. And we're going to come back and touch on those really quickly. Where are your plantations based?
So in central Victoria, so I've got
Central
about
Victoria.
350 hectares. There's 40,000 mature trees there and over 100,000 seedlings that I've planted.
Brilliant. Thank you, mate. That's great. No, look, really appreciate that. And I thought fascinating insight to such a kind of a mature, market globally, but emerging in Australia.